O'Malley, and this is Gearwire.com. Today I'm going to introduce you to the Native Instruments Maschine. Maschine is a groove box, hardware controller slash software application. It's a standalone application. It's a plug-in available for all formats, audio units, VST, RTAS, etc. You can use it in standalone mode, save your work, open it up in your workstation, Pro Tools, whatever it may be, and pick up where you left off using Maschine as a plugin. Basically, this models your typical groove box, basically, your typical MPC, your typical MV8800, and so on and so forth. The biggest difference with the Maschine is that this hardware is just that, it's just a controller. On the back of the hardware controller, there's just a MIDI input, a MIDI output, and a USB port. Very simple. So the power and processing that take place with Maschine all take place in your computer. The number of inputs and outputs you have available are all dependent upon the audio interface that you're using. So it's scalable. You can have a 2-in, 2-out system, or you can have 8 inputs, 8 outputs, 18 inputs, 18 outputs, depending on your setup, basically. So there's a lot of flexibility in that you can pretty much always expand your I/O count. It's around $600 street. Comes with a 5 GB sound library, actually a decent quality sound library, usable sounds. Native Instruments is known for coming with some decent sounds, so these aren't just gimme sounds that just get you started, but they're actually very usable. So at first, let's just cover some of the features you see here on the hardware control surface. So here is the thing, it's Maschine. It's very standard setup. You're very used to seeing the 16 pads. These are velocity sensitive. You can program velocity layers per pad. 16 pads. You've got 8 groups to work with. It's a little bit different than thinking in terms of tracks and channels. It's kind of a unique interface, but very quick to get used to, basically. So in this case, we've got 16 velocity-sensitive pads with 2 levels of lighting, dim for pads that have sounds assigned to them, and bright for the currently selected or active pad. And then these pads obviously have no sounds loaded into them currently. And then each bank or group in this case can hold another set of 16 sounds. Mapped out individually, 1 pad at a time, or in keyboard mode, you can spread 1 sound out throughout the entire 88-note range, basically. Starting from the top here, we got 2 huge display screens. We can see everything that's going on. Most of the work that you do within Maschine can really be done right on the hardware interface. I find that I look at the screen very seldom when I'm using this particular Maschine. Basically, all the feedback you could possibly want is right here. I can load projects from the screens. I can edit sounds. This is also a sampler. I have waveform editing right within the Maschine hardware interface. I can pretty much do everything. So let's start from the top. We've got 8 pots available that map out to different controls depending on the mode that you're in that are listed along the bottom of the screen. We've got 8 buttons along the top that also map to the different functions based on the currently selected mode. The left screen is typically the master mode. In this case, we can go into master mode, group mode, or sound mode. Once you're in one of these modes, the second screen will allow you to access submenus within those particular modes. So if I'm in master mode and I want to tweak my output level, hit the master button and the out button, and then the pots map to level and pan and source and so on. Same thing for groups. I can edit entire groups at one time, or sounds, which is just 1 pad at a time. On the secondary screen, we have source, which in this case will get me to my detailed editing of individual sounds and pads. I can load in effects from here, 2 insert effects per pad, 2 insert effects per group, and also 2 insert effects on the master output. The effects that come with Maschine are actually really good. They cover pretty much all the basics: compression, EQ, flanging, chorus, etc. And there's a few extras thrown in, such as your frequency shifter, ice, kind of a reverb, a metaverb, a different sort of reverb, reflex, beat delays, grain delays, reso chords and lo-fis, etc. But basically you have plenty of effects to choose from. So you're far from limited with just this interface by itself. You can pretty much build entire songs outside of recording vocals, basically. So let's go through some of the function buttons that we have here. Outside of the 16 pads, you can see right above each one of the pads is a secondary function, easily accessed by hitting the shift key. So simple functions that I might usually use the keyboard for, I can do right from the pads. I've got undo and redo, a shift and pad 1 or shift and pad 2. It's very simple. I can quantize from the pads. I can nudge tracks, copy, transpose, and so on. All that without even looking at the screen. Got a very simple transport set up over here. Play gets you right into play mode. Loop, in this case, works as a sort of a play start button. If I ever want to go right back to the beginning of my sequence, or in this case, what they refer to as patterns, I can just hit loop and that'll take me back to the beginning. And I can also back up, move forward, and I can change my grid here. I can change my grid, which will affect my quantized value from anywhere from 1 bar up to 64 triplets, or just off, basically. So you have plenty of options right from the front. Here, we've already covered, we've got 8 groups available. The groups can be considered drum kits. It can be just a collection of sounds. It can be one sound mapped out across the keyboard, as I said earlier. And then above that, we've got the master section. The master section is actually pretty cool because you've always got one dedicated volume knob right here. So if I ever need to turn it down, I don't have to reach to the software and find a fader. I don't have to reach to my interface. I can just turn Maschine up and down right from there. Got a global tempo control and a global swing control, and those 3 pots always do those single functions, so that's pretty nice, pretty handy. Next to that, you might be familiar with the note repeat function. Pretty standard on some groove boxes. You choose, in this case, a grid value, 16th note or 8th note, 16th note, 30 seconds, and so on. And then once you've chosen that, you can hold down note repeat and hold down a pad. When it's playing, it just triggers the sound along with that quantized value, I guess you could call it. Okay, and then you hold down shift and note repeat, and it becomes your tap tempo button. So here you can just get an average of the tempo that you're looking for without actually having to dial in an exact number. But you can always dial in a number as well. If you hold down shift and tempo, it allows you to fine tune. Hold down shift and any of the pots, basically, it allows you to fine tune your settings rather than moving in whole number steps, basically. Okay, in the middle here, we have several function buttons. Mute obviously does exactly that. I hold down the mute button and it allows me to mute either entire groups or entire drum kits, entire sets of sounds, or I can mute individual sounds from within a particular group. So in this case, if I have group A selected, I can hold down mute, and I have the option for my first screen of muting any of the currently assigned groups, or from the second screen, muting any of the sounds in the currently selected group. Pretty easy to follow once you get the hang of it. It's a momentary button, but if I wanted to latch it, maybe for live performance or something of that sort, you hold down mute, and then the mute soft key sticks you in the mute screen basically. And it's just that simple to come out. Same thing with solo, self-explanatory. I want a solo group or a sound within a group. Same thing, I hold down the solo button. It's also temporary, or I can latch that from here. So those are the basics of the Maschine, Native Instruments Maschine hardware controller. And we'll be back with some more, I guess. I'm Owen O'Malley, and this is Gearwire.com.